Good morning. My name's Mike Reams with Reams Realty, and this is
Tiffany McDonough.
And today we're going to talk about seller net sheets.
It's one of those things that a lot of people overlook in the process, and it's probably one of the most important ones you can have. It's basically a document that tells you what your proceeds are going to be after all costs are taken into account.
So what we like to do is when we sit down with the seller, we tell them we got to focus on the bottom line. Don't necessarily focus on the selling price, the list price, but we've really got to focus on the bottom line. And we'll show you exactly what we mean when we say the bottom line. It's the line at the bottom after all the cost, after all the expenses, after mortgages, after everything's paid. It's kind of what we call the walk away number. That's the way that when we're done selling your house, you're going to walk away with that amount of money.
And that is probably the most important question that a seller has when we sit down with them. Yeah, there's a lot that they take into account. What can I do to get my house ready? What are you going to do for me to market my house and find a buyer? But at the end of the day, they want to know what they're walking away with.
And it really comes down to, how precise this is. And Tiffany's always prided herself on trying to get these exactly as close as she can.
I'm a math person.
And so she likes to make them as close as she can. But this is a strong tool for us. This is a tool that we use when we're listing your house. This is a tool that we use when we're negotiating. A lot of times the sellers are in another state and they're looking at this net sheet and they're like, I really need, another $5,000 more. Can you guys negotiate another $5,000 more because I need this amount of money for a down payment on my new house? And, what we like to say is that we're trying to hit your financial obligations. What are your goals in this real estate transaction? And the net sheet helps us show you, hey, with this deal, this is what we're going to do. So today we just kind of want to go through the net sheet and talk about the numbers and talk about where they come from and, how we go. So here's a copy of a net sheet. I'm going to put this up on the screen and we're going to kind of start at the top.
So what we like to do is give you one when we sit down with you and come up with a list price. That gives you different options. We can throw in as many numbers as you want as far as a list price, and it kind of goes through what the expected costs are. Obviously, at the very beginning, we're not going to know every little cost, but it gives you a good idea of what to expect. And that helps you also base the list price. We don't want to base every list price just on what a seller wants at the end, but it helps you determine, is now a good time to sell? Is this what I want to do? Am I going to be able to meet my future goals if I sell this house? But we like to do that at the very beginning to give you an idea. And then as we receive offers, we update that based on the offers and based on what we think or what we recommend would be a good counter offer if necessary. So on this example, we have a seller who obviously listed at $325,000. It goes into account with the brokerage fee. It takes into account grantor's tax. There's different fees that you get as a seller you pay to the state no matter what. And we can actually just go through one by one and kind of break it down for.
We will. One thing I want to talk about is, a couple of years ago in the crazy market, when we were getting 10 multiple offers, we would actually have to turn this sheet sideways and it would be list price, offer number 1, offer number 2, offer number 3,
Yes.
offer number 4. And this was really our evaluation to where we could say, hey, this seller's offering you more of this, but they're asking for closing costs. And it really was our tool that we could sit down and say, okay, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, or sorry, Mrs. Happy Seller, this is the offer that we think, this is how we're going to evaluate all 10 offers, and this is the one that we think you should go with and why. But
we actually had a lot more columns because obviously when you have a multiple offer situation and you have choice, it's not always the bottom line. Not every seller wants, it's not just based on their decision is not going to be based on that bottom line number. Sometimes it's when they want to move. Some people want to close early, so that gives them the opportunity to go buy a house, but they want to stay in there while their kids are still in school. So when we were in that great market and we had multiple offers on every house, it looked a lot different. But just to go over your standard one to give you an idea of what you should be taken into account when you're selling a house and what will affect your bottom line number.
So the first item is the listing firm brokerage fee. That's the fee that we charge as our team to come in. That's where we do all the marketing. That's where we do all the analysis. That's where we do the closings. That's where we do all of the work that we do on the front. And that's listed on the front. And then the next item,
Grand Tours tax, that's something that every seller in the state of Virginia gets charged. It's based off the sales price typically. It's based off the sales price or your assessed value, whichever is higher. For years and years and years now, the sales price has always been higher. That's another, just to throw a little tidbit of information at you. A lot of people think, well, my house is assessed at this is how much it's worth. The majority of the time, it's worth much more.
release fee. This is if you have a lien. This is if you've got a mortgage on the house, a second mortgage, anything
Home
like that.
equity line, anything of that nature. It's basically a fee that the buyer's attorney's office is going to charge you to make sure that that lien gets removed from title. For years, we didn't have this. And that's when I first got into the business. I was on the title side at 16 years old, and you would not believe how many unreleased deeds of trust and liens we would have on properties that could really prevent you from selling your house as quickly as you want, because your title has to be clear in order to sell it to the next person. So they charge this to not only make sure that your mortgage gets paid off, but also to make sure that your mortgage company actually releases that lien of title.
So I like to tell people down at the courthouse, they've got a filing cabinet, and one drawer is your house. So imagine there's 20,000 drawers or filing cabinets down there.
That's how
And
it used to be.
it goes all the way back to the beginning when that property was subdivided and turned into a lot, and you can literally, they just stack one on top of the other, the next deed, the next this. So you can go down and see the history of that property all the way through. And what she's talking about is that lien. We just had one yesterday to where 3 sellers ago in 1993, some mortgage company didn't release that lien. And that's what this is. This is for that attorney to go to the courthouse and make sure that your lien has been stamped. They don't remove it, but they stamp it and say, hey, it's been satisfied. And
There's a
certificate of
document called
satisfaction.
Certificate of Satisfaction or Release that gets recorded down at the courthouse where your mortgage company is stating that that loan has been paid off and it is now released of record.
And that goes right with the next line item, the preparation of the deed. So the deed is actually the document that records who owns the property. It shows it shows that this person sold it to this person, and it shows all that.
And that gets recorded, so it's something that gets signed. It gets prepared by an attorney, has to be done by an attorney, and you will sign it at closing, and that gets recorded, and that's what actually transfers that ownership. There is, whether you use a title company or an attorney, you're going to have to pay as a seller to prepare that deed, and you're also going to have a settlement fee. And that's basically for that title company or attorney to handle your side of the closing, represent your best interests, make sure that the documents get prepared accurately, and that's where you're going to more than likely go into their office and sign the documents that transfers your home ownership to the next buyer.
Termite and moisture inspection. This is always a fun one. So there's actually, the next item, paragraph 13, repairs, and they're kind of tied together. So most mortgages require a termite and moisture inspection. Termite.
Yes, most buyers, when they get a loan, they are going to have to provide a clear, what we call a wood destroying insect infestation report that shows that the home that they are buying is free and clear of active termites, wood boring bees, powder post beetles, different, any sort of wood destroying insect. Not only are there no active infestations, but there's also no damage from any previous infestations. So this is typically the responsibility of a seller. It's kind of your bare minimum that you're expected to do when you sell your house. There's also another side of it that most of our contracts in our area cover because of where we live. Moisture is an issue. So I would say probably 8 to 9 times out of 10 as a seller, you're going to have a company come out. You may already have a contract with someone that you use to spray for ants or spiders. You may have an active termite contract. And what they're going to do is they're going to come out and check to make sure that your house is free and clear of any wood destroying insects and damage. And they're also going to check for moisture. And moisture is strictly, that's a whole nother episode that we can get into, but strictly from the crawl space and below. So if your house is on a slab, it doesn't even apply. But if you're in a crawl space, they're going to check to make sure your house is free and clear of moisture. That is something as a seller, like I said, you're typically responsible for. There are some, some little variations there depending on the contract, but it varies. The company that we do the most business with charges, I think, $95. But I would say you're going to spend no more than $150, $175 for that inspection.
The paragraph 13 repairs, whenever we explain this is paragraph 13 in the purchase contract, in the standard rain contract that we use around here. When we start introducing this to our sellers, we always say this is the most misinterpreted paragraph in the whole thing. Like she just said a second ago, we'll have another whole video just on termite and moisture because it's very complicated and making sure everybody understands that. But if in the contract we agree to do repairs, it would be listed out here so you could see exactly what that cost.
This is another reason why with these estimated net sheets, we call them estimated because it's that we can't predict we just can't predict everything that's going to come up over the course of once you go under contract. But we have a pretty good idea. We try to do our due diligence up front to give you a good idea of what you can expect at the end.
Home warranty. This was definitely something that I first got into real estate in 2011, 2012. We definitely saw a whole lot more of this. We saw a lot more
buyers asking for them as part of their negotiating. It gave them a little sense of security. We don't see them that often. They're still around. We have a wonderful lady who we adore who sells them. And if someone comes to us and is interested in one, we absolutely will send them her way. But they're kind of becoming a thing of the past. They are a sense of security for buyers because if your refrigerator breaks, there's, a whole bunch of fine print. But if your HVAC goes out, anything like that, you can call this company, pay some sort of deductible, and they will come out and repair it or replace it. Again, a lot of fine print. We have this in here because it used to be something that almost every buyer asked for years and years ago, but we very rarely see it now.
Condo POA document fees.
If your house is in a homeowners association, if it's a condo, you as the seller, by law, the buyer has the right to receive what we call the resale package or the association package. And that just outlines, hey, it's in an association, here's the rules, here's the bylaws, here's how much you have to pay, whether it's paid monthly, quarterly, yearly, here's what it covers. And by law, that buyer can terminate the contract up until the day of closing if they don't receive those documents. Once they receive those documents, they have 3 days to review them. In most cases, they have 3 days to review them and can terminate the contract for any reason. They don't even have to tell you why, but they could terminate that contract within those 3 days. The seller is responsible for providing them, depending on your association. A lot of the small homeowner managed associations don't charge that much because it's a pretty easy set to put together. But some of these bigger companies charge. I just had one this week where the fees are getting ridiculous, but in order to get a set within 5 days, which is what our seller wanted to do to get it over to the buyer, it was $430.
Which it does vary from association to association, so that number changes. Mortgage fees, VA and FHA buyers.
There are certain fees by law that the VA, specifically VA buyers, cannot pay. It's changing. There's so much that changes day to day with real estate, but there are certain fees that they can't buy. It's usually very minimal, and it might, again, by the time this goes out, there'll probably be another change, but we keep it on there as a line item just in case.
I'm going to roll these well water test and septic inspections. So if you live in an area that's got a well or septic inspections, the contract actually says that you've got to get that certified and say that, hey, it's got safe water, hey, the septic system's in, good working order, and this is the price for those fees. Don't see that in York County as much, but see it in Gloucester all the time. So much of the properties over there all have well and septics.
Yep. Overnight and or wire fees. This is If you have a mortgage, the title company that's representing the buyer, attorney that's representing the buyer, they are going to overnight your payoff to your mortgage company. They want to make sure they get it there as soon as possible so you're paying the least amount of interest. So it varies again, but roughly $50 per overnight. They're going to overnight your payoff. If you want your proceeds check to be wired to you, or your proceeds to be wired to you, or the check overnight it to you, you're going to have to pay for that as well. If you are an out-of-area seller, your documents for closing have to be signed in front of a notary. So the originals will be overnighted to you, and then you will overnight them back, those originals back to your title company or attorney.
And we just had a change on the notaries this week. There's so much fraud going on in the area that people were actually using fake notary stamps, and they're actually saying now that you've got to use a notary.
These title
certified
companies,
notary.
correct? Title companies. So there's another whole podcast. There's title insurance that a lot of buyers get when they purchase a property, protecting to make sure they got clear and free title. These attorneys' offices and these use title insurers, and they now want to make sure that there's no fraud going on. They want to make sure that if you bought a house and you submitted, you borrowed all this money to purchase a house, that it's actually yours when you go to close. They want to make sure that there's no fake seller on the other side who found a notary who either didn't do their job or they found a fake notary and signed documents transferring ownership to you when really that wasn't the real seller.
We're hearing some stories that, like I said, that's a whole nother podcast. 'Cause
Yes.
some of the stories we're hearing, it's just incredible what they're doing. Repairs. So
Before we list repairs.
yeah, so this is repairs that we can actually, this can either be repairs that we do due to a home inspection. We might negotiate items that have to be fixed, and we might go out and get contractors to work on that. Or a lot of times we'll have another list item here, repairs, if we do things for a seller pre-listing to get things on. This is where we'd have those numbers.
Your mortgage, that's a great document to have when you sit down with us. When we come in to do a listing presentation, it would be awesome to have that mortgage statement if you have one. Even if you have a home equity line that has a zero balance, it still has to be closed out at closing. Don't do it on your own. Don't do it beforehand. But if you have any sort of home equity line, mortgage, have that information. You don't have to go to the ends of the earth to get it, but if you have an idea of what you owe, it's a great number for us to have to include here to give you a more accurate picture.
Because those home equity loans, what people don't understand is they've already put a lien
There's
on
a
your
lien.
house for the whole amount, whether you use it or not. So when we go to the courthouse and check in your little file drawer and look, hey, if you've taken out a $200,000 home equity line, that whole $200,000 is showing, hey, it's on that
a
property,
potential.
and we cannot sell the house until that lien's been released. Taxes, your favorite thing.
My favorite thing. You are responsible for paying up until the day of closing. The buyer is responsible from that point forward for things such as taxes and your association dues if you're in a homeowners association or a condo association. So taxes, a lot of people don't realize that. We just had a seller that we were with them at closing yesterday. They did not realize most localities in our area, you pay June 30th or June 5th and December 5th. When you pay your taxes, if you don't have a mortgage, if your mortgage company isn't paying them, or if your mortgage company is paying them, they're paying in arrears. So when you pay in June, it covers the period from January 1st to June 30th. When your taxes get paid in December, it covers July 1st to December 31st. So if we're close, if you're closing in May or June, you've probably either already paid the taxes yourself or your mortgage company has, so you'll probably get a credit at closing from the buyer. If you're closing at the beginning of the year, January, February, March, they're going to collect a prorated portion of taxes from you that have not been paid, and then the buyer's going to pay for the remaining period. I like it because I'm a math person and I like to get
She
it
likes
as
to try to figure it out exactly to the
accurate as
day, so
possible.
it's exactly perfect. And the taxes change from locality to locality. That's something that we talk to buyers. They're more expensive in Newport News and Hampton. They're cheaper in Gloucester, and they're cheaper in York County. So it really, the taxes, the difference in taxes can affect buyers in a ways too. So that's something else we'll talk about later. The selling firm brokerage fee. This has definitely been
hot topic.
a hot topic of contention nationally and things like this, and all of our, sellers and buyers, everybody wants to know this, but what we will say is that right now, today, for this podcast, this is negotiable. This is in the contract. So what's happening now is when you get a purchase contract, the buyer's agent is actually writing in there, hey, Mr. Seller, you will pay the number that we've got right here. This is 3%, and we've got that included.
It's market dependent. So we're not telling you as a seller that you have to pay the commission to the buyer's agent or their firm, but it's definitely going to be market dependent. I would say, with all the changes that were recently made in a market, in the previous market where we were telling you we had multiple offers and this spreadsheet was much bigger, you're probably going to be able to get away without paying the selling firm brokerage fee, but it all is going to be market dependent. So it's a line item on there. We're going to prepare you for whatever the market is at that time, but know that it's forever changing.
Buyer's closing cost, another market-driven cost. So, when I first got into the business, 2011, 12, things were definitely slower. We were coming right off the Great Recession. And I sat down with every seller and told them,
You're going to pay closing
you're going to
costs.
pay a full 3% closing cost. I can remember I had one guy was a colonel, and he was, beating on the table that he was not paying the buyer's closing cost, and he did. But today, market-driven, we're not.
It's just very, it depends.
Depends on the offer, depends on the
Yep.
house, how long it's been on the market. So, what we try to do is we try to prepare you for the worst and hope for the best. And then when we get an offer, we're reflecting exactly what that's going to be so you can see it. So,
And that's, again, why this document is so important, because we don't want you getting to the closing table and realizing, well, one, we've had situations in the past where the other side did not prepare their sellers, and they get to the closing and the attorney's office or title company orders their payoff to find out they don't have enough money to sell their home and they don't have the cash to bring to the table. So we're all sitting there staring at each other saying, how are we going to make this deal work? Because they cannot afford to sell their home. They owe more than what they're going to net. And so this is, again, why it's so important. Most of the time when people are selling their home, here recently we're seeing more elderly selling their home, unfortunately people passing away. But when you're selling a home to purchase another home, it's extremely important to know what your bottom line is, to know whether it's worth the move.
well, that, when we were doing all the short sales in 13 and 14, I was talking.
We don't want to go back to that.
No, it was awful, and it really was the difference between we were having sellers walk away with $800, and they were happy because they're like I'm ecstatic.
Just want to break even.
I was at a event the other night, and a past seller came up to me, and he was telling somebody, "Yeah, Mike sold my house, and I walked away with $1,250," and it was the most. I was so happy to sell my home because I thought it was going to be a short sale. That's what he thought, but that's why these net sheets are so important, so that you've really got to know what that is.
And it's one of the first steps. It's not the very first step, but it's one of the first steps. If you are even thinking about selling, call us. We have people that we've worked with for 2 years before we ever list their home. It is not a bother to us to come out and have these conversations to see if it's worth it. There's no obligation. You don't owe us anything for us to come out, sit down, and have a conversation with you. From looking at your home to telling you, hey, we really think you need to get this, this, and this done in order to sell, or from strictly just looking at a numbers perspective to let you know, does it make sense for you to sell right now? Give us a call. Don't sit there and wonder and Google. Call us. Don't use the Google. It's there's so many fees that are specific to our area that no one takes into account. And then you're stuck with, again, that last minute stress because you realize once you get too far into the process that it maybe not be a good time, or maybe it is.
Well, and I'm seeing the same thing with buyers. I'm having a lot of buyers, they get on Zillow and they plug in a couple of numbers, and what they're looking at as a monthly payment, they're coming to me like, hey, Mike, I can afford $350,000. And we're like, you didn't do the taxes, you didn't
Right.
do insurance, you
The
didn't do
association
PMI, you didn't do
fees,
flood,
yeah.
all of this stuff that you didn't take into, you can't even afford to buy. So it's really important that you do sit down, you do talk to us, have a quick, easy conversation so that we can tell you, hey, this is what it's going to be.
We're here to guide you and help you. We're not, at the end of the day, if you never move, a couple meetings with us, we want to help you make the best decision for your family. So, this is one of the biggest factors for sellers. And like you said, buyers too. It's a different type of document that we'll go into at another time, but this is extremely important for you to take a look at and determine, does this help you reach your goals?
And then lastly, that's the bottom line right there. On this one, it's 117,890. And you can see the different numbers. So that's what we call your walk away number. This is the number that they're going to be writing, the buyer's closing company is going to be writing you a check, and this is what you're going to go buy your next house with or go, do whatever. But that's the bottom line, and that's what we're all working for, is that bottom
Nothing
line.
makes me happier than when we get to the closing, a couple days before the closing day, and I get that closing disclosure to review, and I go back and I compare it to my net sheet to see how close I was to being accurate. So
And they're
we
like
try
$37 off, and she's so happy. Like, hey, look, it's exactly what I told the
we
people.
try very hard to give you the most accurate picture possible so you can make the best decision possible.
Well, thanks for spending a few moments with us today. We really appreciate it. And in this series, we're going to start talking about all the different things. We've mentioned a couple of different things we're going to get into. But we hope to see you soon. And please tune in, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.